Hi, everyone.
Hello again. We're talking about peace and security, which seems to be the last sign that the Watchtower has set up as an indicator of the day of Jehovah being near, according to their translation of 1 Thessalonians 5, verses 1 to 3. We wanted to just let you know what Ray Franz said about this. So we're jumping ahead in Search of Christian Freedom to the portion where Ray analyzes this alarmism, this Armageddon alarmism, which the Watchtower has been addicted to from the very beginning, of course. So let's just read through Ray's text on this and then note some of the connections he makes that might not be obvious to the rest of us.
Okay. Both Christ and the Apostle Paul urged for calmness against letting earthly events and predictions become a source of alarming excitement. The Watchtower publications do the opposite, utilizing whatever world events may be current to foment agitated presentiment. Is that how you say that?
Yeah,
agitated presentiment. A sense of something cataclysmic about to occur. They are openly committed to maintaining an unremitting sense of urgency among all members. This is used to fill the roles of both the proverbial carrot and the stick. On the one hand, it entices with the prospect of surviving Armageddon into a new world and never dying. On the other, it serves as a prod toward intensified activity in carrying out the organization's program and working toward its goals.
It is an urgency based on significance attached to world events, the implications being those the organization itself attributes to the events. Within this century, as in all previous centuries, we have seen numerous alternating periods of notable violence and of relative peace. The Watchtower organization has found a formula to use either circumstance in creating a sense of imminent disaster. Whenever a period of increased violence and unrest appears, this is pointed to as proof that the predictions are right and that the time is very near. When those conditions subside, and later quite opposite conditions, favorable for greater peace, develop, this is nonetheless utilized as evidence that sudden destruction is near, based on Paul's word about men saying peace and safety at 1 Thessalonians 5:3. The Watchtower publications have made statements like these.
These are direct quotes. This prophecy makes it clear that, just prior to the end of this system of things, peace and security will be declared in some exceptional way, whether by the United Nations or independently by political and religious leaders. Now, in the waning months of President Reagan's term, and in the thawing atmosphere of Secretary Gorbachev's glasnost openness policy, there appears to be serious talk about diffusing the nuclear arms situation. Whether this is a prelude to bring about a supposed peace and security for the world in general, we cannot foresee. But in accordance with Bible prophecy, that is what Christians are looking for. It will come as an unmistakable signal that world destruction is imminent.
Those are all quotes from Watchtower
Yeah.
Awake in the True Peace and Security book, right?
Right. Yet the context of the apostle's words are against this very viewpoint, for he states, "About dates and times, my friends, we need not write to you. For you know perfectly well that the day of the Lord comes like a thief in the night. While they are talking of peace and security, all at once calamity is upon them." So that's 1 Thessalonians 5:3 again, in the New English Bible.
That ends the direct quotes from the Watchtower publications, but then Ray comments, and I think this paragraph is well worth thinking about deeply. Since that day of the Lord comes like a thief, clearly the apostle is not saying that people's talking of peace and security is some sort of signal or alarm in the form of a notable pronouncement. Thieves do not supply unmistakable signals or alarms to herald their imminent arrival. It is evident that Paul's words correspond to the words spoken earlier by Christ, that his coming will find people in an apparent state of normalcy, with life going on as usual, people eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, building and planting, with nothing to excite premonitions or give advance indications that judgment is suddenly to begin. So it's suitable that we read the passage he's alluding to here straight from the text, right, which is Matthew 24.
37 to 44. For just as the days of Noah were, so the presence of the Son of Man will be. For as they were in those days before the flood, eating and drinking, men marrying and women being given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark. And they took no note until the flood came and swept them all away. So the presence of the Son of Man will be. Then 2 men will be in the field. One will be taken along, and the other be abandoned. 2 women will be grinding at the handmill. One will be taken along, and the other be abandoned. Keep on the watch, therefore, because you do not know of what day your Lord is coming. But know one thing, that if the householder had known in what watch the thief was coming, he would have kept awake, and not allowed his house to be broken into. On this account you too prove yourselves ready, because at an hour that you do not think to be it, the Son of Man is coming.
Could it be clearer than that? Mm-hmm. So how do they get away with intruding the thought of a fall of false religion and an announcement that religion is going to be destroyed? And how do they make that scenario work? Well, the obvious answer is by the way they do Bible study. Mm-hmm. Jumping from Thessalonians to Revelation to Daniel, etc.
Yeah, Humpty Dumpty hermeneutics.
So I think, looking back now to our history in the Watchtower, I think how they got away with it with us in the generation I was still in there, because a lot of you will remember this book, True Peace and Security, How Can You Find It? ? This was a new edition of a book that had come out in 1973, just before 1975, Alarmism, connected to the promise of 1 Thessalonians 5:3. And of course, this is put out in 1986, the revised edition, in the very year when the United Nations has declared it a year of peace. So how they get away with it is by continually connecting these ideas in the minds.
It's decades of conditioning people to make those connections that they've planted in their head, and then just repeating them over and over and over again, every decade.
How do we escape then the influence of this kind of powerful propaganda? And the answer has to be we have to know our Bibles really well. Specifically, we have to know context. So in the next segment, we want to concentrate on what the context of 1 Thessalonians and indeed 2nd, because 2nd Thessalonians was written apparently shortly after 1 Thessalonians, because Paul had already heard through the mail, as it were, through messengers, that some had misunderstood some of the things he'd said in 1 Thessalonians and in the way he taught them before either of those letters were written. So the context, the immediate context we'll get into, but also the larger context of the time and the seasons in Paul's life and the life of the Thessalonians around the year 50 of our common era. 1 Thessalonians, we haven't even said yet, was quite possibly the first book written in the New Testament. So there's a lot to unpack in the way of historical background and in the way of what Paul has already said. Before you get to 1 Thessalonians 5, he's already set up his discussion. And so in the original context, it's connected to thoughts about what Christians generally call the rapture, specifically the literal second coming of Christ, and what that will mean for believers, even believers who have died. So that's in the next segment. Context, context, context.